Yochanan Castellanos. This is the second time we've asked him to come here to speak. The first time was certainly very interesting, and I assume it will be today. Yochanan is a native Texan. Grew up in San Antonio to a Christian family. His father and mother were in leadership positions in the church, and he, Yochanan, worked in youth work in the church, and he founded a church of his own as a young adult. Last time he told us a very interesting story of how, while he was a priest, he slowly decided or found out that what he was teaching was not really what he should be teaching, and eventually he has converted. He lives here in Israel, in Ramat Bet Shemesh. He told me that the topic he will be talking about is the curse of bloodshed, the high price of the promised land and freedom. I think I know what the topic might be, but let's have Yochanan tell us.
It is a pleasure, delight to be with you. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us at this time for what is my second time, as Moshe was stating. And I hope that you will enjoy the presentation as much as I am enjoying the context in which this presentation is birthed. It's here in Israel, as many of you know, we're at the threshold of the Day of Independence, as it is called in Hebrew, Yom Ha'atzmaut. And so you'll see that the air is filled with that anticipation. There are flags flying, cars, on buildings, on homes. As a matter of fact, our home just was christened with its own flag this afternoon, late this afternoon, and this is the very first time that we've done this activity while in Israel. So we're also joining the excitement. But as many of you know, before the excitement of the celebration that we will share in a few hours, there comes this day of remembrance. A very somber tone is covering all of Israel, and certainly all the hearts of the Jewish people, as we remember many of the fallen soldiers in one way or another. They're being remembered this evening, and many soldiers are at their post as we speak, so that we can continue to move back and forth safely and confidently through our roads and our cities. So shout out goes out to all of our IDF soldiers and thank you for the dedication, the bravery, and your families should be commended as well for sharing your lives with us as well. May God continue to protect you and bless you, each and every one of you. As I said, the topic that I chose this evening is to speak a little about the Yom Ha'atzmaut. As I was stating, or Moshe was stating, I'm new to Yiddishkeit, and as a result of my being so new to Judaism, there are many the family cycle of our Judaism is also relatively new to me. There are so many things that I still need to learn, and so almost every holiday or every occurrence seems to be a learning experience for me. It's something new. It's almost as if I'm a newborn on many levels in many areas. So this is a topic that is definitely not foreign. I was in America, and as many of you know, in America, patriotism is instilled in the children from a very young age, excuse me, and that was the case. I don't know now, but it was the case when I was growing up. So I grew up in a very patriotic environment, and I was very patriotic. And my wife and I were commenting as we were coming in to Yerushalayim that she was sharing that she has become even more patriotic since making Aliyah, living here. It seems, she said, that this whole aura of the land, of the flag, of the IDF soldiers, the family, everything that it represents, just kind of pulls at certain strings that perhaps she didn't even know she had there. So I think it was in her merit that we actually went out and bought a flag at her behest, and so I'm enjoying this part of our time here, and hopefully through the many websites, Facebook, and pictures will come to you, and you will also get to enjoy some of the celebrations as they unfold in the next 48 hours. I thought I'd read some of the I just heard a lot of you tuning me out because I said I was going to read. But I thought that would be the best way to bring across to all of you some of the ideas surrounding the day of independence that we celebrate. And this book that I have in front of me was a gift to me by a young, not a young woman, but a woman whose family was living many of these moments of history, as many families that live here in Israel did. She gave it to me a few years ago. It's a book called "O Jerusalem." It's a book put out by Simon & Schuster. The authors of this book, Larry Collins and Dominique Lapierre. I thought I'd read to you some excerpts from this book in an attempt to set the tone, and then perhaps it might not open, the topic itself might not open itself to any discussion or questions and answers, but nonetheless I thought I'd try to bring home some kind of an application that perhaps will have some practical meaning for our viewing audience. So I'll from the jacket of this book, I'll give you just a little prelude of what this book is about, and it says as follows. Jerusalem, the mystic heart of three great religions, condemned to pay for the passions stirred by its stones, by being through 40 centuries the most bitterly disputed site in the world. Their story, the fruit of 5 years of intensive research. This is Larry and Dominique who put this book together. The way that they put this book together is very engaging, so that if you have an opportunity to find this book, I would recommend it. I have a hard time putting it down. since the way that they put this book, it's almost as if it's a reporter embedded in that time, although they're writing obviously, but it's a minute by minute description of what was going on as the drama of that was unfolding here in November of 1947 is being told by them. And what what was happening during that time in November of 1947 is that Jews and Arabs and any other persons that were living here in the land or here at the time were basically glued to the radio at that time. The authors describe that afternoon of Saturday, November 29th, 1947, in the following paragraph. They're reporting on events that are occurring in at that time in New York, in a place called Flushing Meadow, where 56 delegates of the 57 members of the General Assembly of the United States were called upon, I'm sorry, the United Nations, thank you, Moshe. And I'm reading this. The General Assembly of the United Nations were called upon to decide the future of what the authors called a sliver of land set on the eastern rim of the Mediterranean, half the size of probably Denmark and maybe even Rhode Island, might be just as big as Israel. Definitely you can fit Israel many times over in the big state of Texas from where I come from. They continue describing those events of that Saturday afternoon as follows. No debate in the brief history of the United Nations, there I go again, had stirred passions comparable to those aroused by the controversy over that land to which each member of it might in some way trace a part of its spiritual history. Before the General Assembly was a proposal to cut the ancient territory into two separate states. One was supposed to be an Arab state and the other one a Jewish state. Yes, I hear some of you raising an eyebrow or two. I thought the same thing. I thought that this fight over a two-state country was something of a novelty. I thought it was more of current events. But apparently, this is an issue that has plagued this part of the world since time immemorial. That proposal represented the collective wisdom, quote unquote, of a United Nations special committee instructed to find some way of resolving 30 years of struggle between Jew and Arab for control of what these authors call Palestine. The proposal had been a staggering blow to Jewish hopes. Why? Because whereas they came together on a decision that a Jewish state should be born, they really couldn't make up their minds about what to do with the city of Jerusalem. They thought that the best thing to do was to make Jerusalem a universal type city. You know, even though they didn't use that term, they thought that it shouldn't be in the control of the Jewish people nor the Arabs, but that perhaps a neutral party should have control. Recreating, the narrative continues, a Jewish state without Jerusalem as its capital was was a curse to the Jewish people. It was for them like a body resurrecting, coming back from the dead, but without a soul. And that, again, seems to me, we hear the same theme come through once again. I remember working a few years back on Mount Zion as I was working with a yeshiva there. I was introduced to this controversy about the land of Jerusalem being turned over to this authority or that authority. Mount Zion is also part of this struggle. It's in a crisis situation as we speak. The powers that want to take over that are not Arab parties, but they are the Vatican. These are all the same players that come up time and time again. And this was then, as it is today, the same struggle through which our Jewish people, the Jewish people here in the land in general and specifically in Jerusalem are going through. Our ancestors, as the authors call them, the first wandering Hebrew tribes who were fleeing Mesopotamia, had barely set foot on this land before history condemned them to 10 centuries of warfare, migration, and slavery. Finally, fleeing Egypt under Moses, they began their 40-year trek back to the hills of Judea to found their first sovereign state. And there are many opinions, and what I'm going to share with you is by no means an editorial remark. I'm just going to share with you those conversations which I've had with, or maybe I've read about those individuals who don't believe that that this is a legitimate state. And I'm speaking from the Jewish side of the fence, because to them perhaps it was not founded in a totally religious fashion. And nonetheless, it is here, it thrives, and we continue to move forward through every challenge that comes to us from the land and also from outside of the land, knowing fully well, I believe each and every one of us on some level understands that our ancestors came through many a hardship, many a trial in order to come to this place in time as we are today. The authors use a very dramatic phrase which I really appreciate in referring to our history. They call it the tortured history of our land. And certainly not only our land has seen that as a reality, but our people as well. What was happening at the same time on the other side, the authors state as follows: in the Arab eyes, the Balfour Declaration had been an act of pure imperialism, according to them. It was basically what they were saying is that this is a declaration, this is a move that is totally being pushed on us and our people. They did not expect, obviously, that the vote would go against them. The Arabs, like many of these of their people, had their claim to this land and they presented this claim before these nations that had gotten together on this evening, hoping that they would be heard. Less than half a year, the authors continue to say, after David Ben-Gurion had signed his first editorial in Jerusalem on the eve of the First World War, 7 young Arabs, 2 of them Palestinians, had met in Damascus, and they founded a secret society which they gave a very seductive name to, Al-Fatat, which means young girl. What was this society for? Their purpose was for the liberation of the Arab world from the Turkish Empire at the time. But more important, it represented to them the first manifestation of a Renaissance Arab nationalism that disputed Jewish claims to this land for half a century then. Again, it sounds very familiar, right? What you're hearing here. These are old, very established arguments denying that the Jewish people have any right at all, if any, to this land. And there are organizations back at that time that are getting together and continue to make these allegations and presentations before national assemblies and definitely before the United Nations. As this is happening on that evening in New York, 6,000 miles away from there, there was the authors continue to describe that the sacred city of Jerusalem waited impassively for the newest sign of its destiny. The authors described that evening in many coffee shops or even in the market squares, there was Jews and Arabs alike sitting almost glued, fixated on the radio, just listening to what was to happen to their land. Whether in the sacrifice of animals on the altar of her ancient Jewish temple, or the sacrifice of Christ upon a cross, the authors continue, or the constantly renewed sacrifice of men upon her walls, Jerusalem had lived as no other city in the world under the curse of bloodshed. Yet her name, according to legend, came from the ancient Hebrew Yerushalayim, which means the city of peace. And her first settlements had stretched down from the Mount of Olives under a grove of palm trees whose branches would become a universal symbol of peace. An unending stream of prophets had proclaimed here the peace of God to man, and David, the Jewish king who had made the city his capital, had celebrated it with the words, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem." Sacred to these 3 religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Jerusalem's stones bore the stigmata of her sanctity, and her walls the memory of the crimes committed within them in the name of religion. David, Pharaoh, Sennacherib, and Nebuchadnezzar, Ptolemy, and Herod, Titus, and the Crusaders all had fought and burned and killed here. 200 yards east of the Jewish quarter, enclosed in a valley barely 10 feet wide, was a facade of huge uneven stone blocks. Those stones, remnants of Solomon's temple, were the spiritual center of Judaism, the Wailing Wall, the symbolic beacon toward which 20 centuries of Jewry had turned to mourn their exile. Caressed to an ochre sheen by the reverent touch of thousands of hands, lips, and foreheads. They had resisted every calamity, natural and man-made. A handful of black-coated Orthodox Jews were bobbing up and down to the rhythmic sing-song of their ancient prayers, and they stood as perpetual guards at the shrine of this glorious and also painful history. Stuck into the cracks and crevices of this great stone blocks were dozens of scraps of paper. They were memorandums, memos from the faithful to Hashem, petitioning for his blessing on a newborn son, an ailing wife, a fledgling business, but above all, on this November night, the freedom of God's people. Just as the Jewish people, represented through all of the Judaica and our sacred shrines and holy places, the authors go on to report that there were also Christians on their side of the old city, and Muslims as well, holding on to their hope in their own deliverance, depending on how they looked at their sacred scriptures. The authors bring these three dramas that are unfolding to a highlight with the following paragraph. Ringing over the old city's rooftops with equally sonorous fervor, the bells of the church towers, the piercing calls to prayer by the speakers of the Muslims, and the shofar blowing from the synagogues, calling all of Jerusalem for prayer. For thousands in the city, they were a reminder that Jerusalem was only a stop along this mystic journey. A journey whose destination was as a deep ravine running below the city's eastern walls. There, below the spare slopes of the Mount of Olives, ran the biblical valley of Jehoshaphat, to which the trumpets of the Last Judgment would call the souls of all mankind at the end of the world. Anticipation of that event had made Jerusalem a city where men came to die as well as to live. And generations of Christians, Jews, and Muslims slept scattered under a sea of white stones around this valley of the Mount of Olives, achieving in death in Jerusalem what they had so often failed to achieve in life, a peaceful reconciliation of their claims to its ramparts. So my question is, what's this got to do with you, if anything? You're way over there on the other side of the Atlantic, and this story continues to unfold on this side of the Atlantic. So I thought I'd bring you closer to us. If I could have you physically here, that would be the best, but we'll have to do with this system for now. I was thinking about you, and on many levels, you and I are very similar. You see, as you remember, some of you from my last presentation, I paid a price in my pursuit for truth. That price was by way of loss of a career, of family ties, friends, even moving, physically moving from one location in that place in Texas to another, all in the pursuit of truth. And you and I are very similar because you have also paid a price, I believe. You've done many of the same things in your pursuit for truth, and you've on many levels isolated yourself from what you knew, or those things that you knew, or those people that you were associated with, all for your love of the God of Israel. So, again, I ask you, what does this Day of Independence have to do with you? And to that, I'd like to remind you of a prophet's words. It's the prophet Amos in his 9th chapter, verses 14 and 15, and I'll read it. He says, as he's receiving this word from God, the prophet says, "And I will restore my people Israel. They shall rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. And they shall till gardens and eat their fruits. And I will plant them upon their soil, nevermore to be uprooted from the soil that I have given them, said the Lord your God." On this day of independence, as we here in Israel and Jews everywhere celebrate our Day of Independence, what this should mean to you is that it should reaffirm your belief in God's Word. God has a universal word. It has a universal impact. Everything that He is doing out of love for His creation, He has been doing it through both the people which we call today the Jews and the land which we call Israel. But it's all out of love for His creation, of which you are a part of. And to come to this day of celebrating the Day of Independence for Israel, you should also feel a little tingle, a little excitement in your heart, because the words of God are ringing truer than ever before. This week I was reading a couple of articles which I'd like to just kind of report on. A 2,000-year-old mikveh was discovered just south of Jerusalem, and it dates back to the Second Temple era. There again, laying our claim that we have been here since time immemorial. And the words of God through the prophet Amos bring this message to our lives. See, God is not only doing a work in the world through the land and through the people, but He's doing a work of restoration, of healing for you personally also. God is both a world God and He's also a personal God. Israel, c21.org, if you want to look it up, it's a website that reported the following: 65 ways Israel is saving our planet. See, we are here in this land. We have become a people, but it's not just to live our lives in isolation without any concern to what's going on around us and beyond our borders. We have a mission. We have a worldwide mission and a concern for our fellow man. And all of this should move you to action. what should you do? Well, I would suggest the following. That you should start by, or continue rather. I should frame it in those terms. You should continue praying for the people and the land, just like you've always had. But I want to add this little caveat that today your prayer for the land and the people need to become more focused, more targeted. You know, this is the era of technology, and everything around us just kind of like says to everyone, it's got to be focused, it's got to be targeted. And the same thing I would say about your prayers for the land and the people. I would suggest that this is a wonderful organization with which I am privileged to be a part of. Noahide World Center.org is an organization whose mission, whose plans and dreams are regarding you. You should go to our website and find out what kind of plans, what kind of dreams we are dreaming about a person like you. And help us by praying for those plans, for those dreams, for that team that is doing this. This is what you should do on not only this Day of Independence that we are about to celebrate together, but I would challenge you each and every day, or at least once a week. Also invest. Invest of your personal resources in the land. Make plans to visit Israel, if not annually, biannually. Just the way you make plans to go to Disneyland or to Hollywood or any of the other famous sites there in America or beyond. Make plans. Invest in the work that is being done, that is continuing from the time that we became a state. Join us, help us with your personal resources. Support the team of men and women that are working through Noahide World Center.org through your tithe. I'll close with these final words. Written for the great Hebrew king who made the city his capital, the words of the ancient Psalm of David remain as true today as when they were first sung. Pray, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Peace be within thy walls, and prosperity within thy palaces. God bless you. And I see you soon on this side of the Atlantic.
I think that was a fantastic message. We plan to put this on the internet, and you can look for it, and I think you will want to tell friends and other people to look for this and to hear this message. Very well done, very powerfully done. I really want to thank Yochanan for the effort that he and his wife made to get here in spite of the traffic. I think it was really worth it. I want to say Bob Wells says thank you for the classes, and really thank you, and I want to thank Raya, who had to leave. This is Moshe Goldberg signing off. Come back 4 weeks from today. I said I had the date before. May 12th, we're scheduling another broadcast. I'm not going to go into exactly who's talking, although I think I know, but plans don't always pan out. Anybody who is in Jerusalem is invited to come hear me talk next Monday at the OU Center about this book that I think is also very powerful and a very important book by Abraham Livni, The Return of Israel and the Hope of the World. This is Moshe Goldberg signing off. Very nice being with you. Good night.